Welcome. Well, one of the great things about having a YouTube channel is the comments and interacting with the users. I have learned a lot from the comments, and I also have answered a lot of questions. Unfortunately, it's really hard to do justice to some of the questions, and in this video I'd like to answer a very common question that I've received after doing videos on setting up multi-monitor cockpits. That question goes something like this: what big screen TV should I select for use in my sim? Or what things should I look for in a TV that I select for my simulator? In this short video, I'm going to share with you some of the things I've learned in the process of buying TV monitors for use in my sim, and share some of the mistakes I made too. So let's get started. So I'm going to start out with the one thing that is definitely a deal breaker, and that is input lag. Input lag is the difference between the time when the video signal is generated by the simulator and when it is actually displayed on the television. If you've ever been in a large TV store, you've heard the echoes as different TVs had different delays, and this can be substantial because many TVs have post-processing to improve the picture. While it's not quite as critical for flying as it is for first-person shooter games, you will be frustrated if there's a noticeable lag between control inputs and response in the video on your screen. This delay is measured in milliseconds or thousandths of a second. Anything under about 20 is very good. Values under 40 are probably acceptable, certainly nothing over 50. And the next question is, how do you measure this? Well, one source is an excellent website called Ratings, not spelled exactly with all the letters, Ratingscom, which includes a section on gaming televisions. And they have a lot of really good information, which I'm going to refer to several places during this presentation. But it is a great source of information. Unfortunately, it has a limited number of TVs, and it also has only TVs that have been out for a while. So it's actually a better source of information on what to look for instead of the information itself. Another source is the manufacturer's information. If we take this TCL TV, for example, which is reasonably priced, and we scroll down, we can see it does talk about gaming. But if you look, it doesn't really give you a value. It just says ultra low lag. So that's an indication it probably is acceptable, but there's not any hard numbers there. When I click the specifications, there is no value given for input lag. But this is still a good source of information. There is hardware available from Leo Bodnar to measure the lag time, input lag time. The 1080p unit is somewhat affordable, but as you see, the 4K unit, which is a separate unit, is quite expensive. Probably not that practical, but it is possible. One other thing to watch for is that some TV manufacturers have a game mode which eliminates some of the processing of the signal and gives lower lag times, and is worth the trade-off for any loss in picture quality. Suffice it to say that input lag is a deal breaker, something that you won't put up with if it's not within limits. It's just not easily overlooked like some other flaws in a television used in flight simming. Now the next consideration, and this is usually the first question I get, is what size TV should I use for my simulator? I've heard the saying that size doesn't matter, and in this case it really doesn't in some regards. Now I did a whole video on the proper eye position for accurate viewing of monitors, and I'll link that and also put it in the show notes. But there's two key principles about the perfect eye position for using your flight simulator. One is that you need to be centered on the monitor both horizontally and vertically and looking at it directly on, perpendicular to the surface of the monitor. And second, that you need to have the physical field of view from edge to edge be equal to the displayed field of view. That makes everything look the right size. So assuming two different size monitors, say 1920 by 1080 full HD, and the field of view the same, as the screen gets bigger, you have to move further back to maintain that field of view. And really, you get the exact same view. The difference is that the pixels are larger on the larger screen, but the resolution remains the same, and the image that you see remains the same, just closer or further away. So the main reason for using a larger screen is to facilitate placing a cockpit structure or your flight controls or other things between you and the screen. As I mentioned in a previous video, my favorite layout is 3 monitors with a 60-degree field of view each, with the side monitors rotated back laterally 60 degrees. As I said before, the pilot's eye position needs to be centered on the forward monitor also. So this creates some requirements to have enough room between the monitors to get your cockpit structure in there. And if it's a 2-seat structure, it has to be a little wider on the right side. So therefore, the bottom line is the size of the monitor is really determined by the size of the cockpit that you're using and being sure it can fit between the monitors. The next question I get is, do I need a 4K monitor or is HD good enough? Well, that decision's become easy lately because most all monitors over 40 inches are sold as 4K monitors now. It's really hard to find a 1080p monitor. And until recently, even if you had a 4K monitor, at least in multi-monitor setups, you couldn't support that monitor with your normal GPU. Now with these super GPUs, the 30 series and the 40 series from NVIDIA, that's no longer the case. It is possible to run multi-monitor systems at 4K, but it does take a lot of horsepower, and most people probably wouldn't find it worthwhile for the following reason. Let's look at that setup I described where I'm using a 1920 by 1080 monitor with a 60-degree field of view. That 1920 pixels, which spans the screen side to side, is covered by the 60-degree field of view, yielding a pixel per degree of 32. Now the human eye resolution for someone with 20/20 vision is about 60 pixels per degree. And for a 4K monitor with the same field of view, the pixels per degree is 64, which equals as good as a 20/20 vision can see. But we should remember that each one of those 4K monitors has the same number of pixels as 4 HD monitors. And in a 3-monitor system, you'd be going to the equivalent of 12 monitors. And that's really taxing most any video card. So it comes down to a trade-off. Do we want smooth motion or do we want high resolution? And in most cases, for flight simulation, we're better off to have smooth motion with a good frame rate. So my suggestion is that even though you will probably not use the 4K initially, I would buy a 4K monitor which can be run at 1080p until your GPU can handle it someday in the future. Now another factor to consider, and this is one thing that you might not think of, is the side viewing ability of the monitor. You're going to be looking at this monitor from the center straight on, but as you look to the edges, because of the angle, it's going to lose brightness and also the color will shift slightly. Now the ratings website that I mentioned before actually has these rotating pictures to show the loss of visibility as you rotate the screen. My experience using my 60-degree field of view, I'm only looking at the edges of the screen at a 30-degree angle, and it doesn't seem to be a real problem, although it does show up sometimes more on videos and pictures that I take than I notice with my naked eye. Now the next issue to consider is the refresh rate of the monitor. Generally, they are either 60 or 120 Hertz, and 120 is becoming more and more common because it does offer smoother motion for broadcast television. And if your simulator can't keep up with the 120 rate, it may just be repeating frames until the next frame arrives. One feature, though, that I do strongly suggest related to this is to find a unit that has variable refresh rate. This allows the television to vary its frame rate to match the incoming frame rate of the source media, in this case the simulator. This helps avoid judder, missed frames, and tearing. Tearing is when the frame being displayed is changed so that you're actually displaying part of one frame and part of the next frame in the same screen, and creates visual effects that are very immersion killing. Now, another feature you might want to include if you're buying an LCD screen is local dimming. If you don't fly the simulator at night a lot, it may not be a factor, but as you may know, LCD screens are backlit, and that backlighting creates oftentimes not very dark blacks. So it looks gray, and it really does detract from night flying. Local dimming allows the LCD lighting behind the screen to be dimmed in regions so that dark areas can be completely blackened with no backlighting. If you want pure blacks for night flying and you have deep pockets, an OLED screen, not to be confused with a QLED screen, is perfect because it does not have any lighting. It produces the light right in the pixels, and when they're off, they're off. However, this type screen is definitely prone to burn-in and can be an expensive proposition if you leave it on sometime with a fixed image. Another thing to factor into your purchase decision is the reflectivity of the screen. This too is included in the Ratingscom evaluations of different TVs. If you're simming in a bright room with windows or bright lights, this may be a factor, even on a single screen simulator. But if you have 3 screens, the screens can illuminate each other, and you can see reflections from the adjoining screens, and this is also quite immersion destroying. So I would suggest that if you're doing a multi-monitor, that you consider a low reflectivity screen with a matte finish if you can find it. Another fairly obvious thing to consider when you're picking a TV is bezel width. You're going to be stuck with those bezels between the monitors forever, and the more narrow you can find the bezel, the better. You really won't notice them that much once you start flying the simulator, but it is nice if you can find narrow bezels. Now after that, Ratingscom has a lot of really nerdy, detailed settings and information, things like color gamut, the contrast ratio, the HDR, and so on. And these are things you can look and learn about there at Ratingscom. A lot of these things you can judge subjectively by seeing the TV in action, even on the showroom floor. Oh, and one thing I didn't mention that could be a consideration is sound. Realize that if you're using HDMI and you plan to listen to the sound through the TV, you can only use one TV at a time. So you need to be sure that the speakers are placed where they'll give you the sound you want if you don't intend to use other external speakers. Another thing that I also get questions about usually are curved screens. Should I buy a curved screen? Well, let me explain that the images that are produced by the flight simulators are for projection onto a flat screen. So when you put it on a curved screen, you're actually introducing a small amount of error. It does eliminate the washout that we talked about due to the edges, because the edges are more directly pointed at you. But on the other hand, you are slightly distorting the image. Now for field of view 60 degrees or less, I don't think it's a factor at all. But you are actually producing a less pure image on a curved screen, and you're paying more for it. So my suggestion is avoid curved screens. So now I'd like to explain how I would go about buying TVs for my 3-monitor simulator, which I may be doing here in the near future. And I've thought a little bit about it, and I've done this once before, although I wasn't equipped with as much information as I have now and that you have now. First, I'd like to explain that if you're going to use a 3-monitor simulator, I strongly encourage you to buy all three TVs at the same time. First, the picture quality and color gradation, contrast, these things can vary widely from brand to brand, model to model. So having them matching is important. And even that's not a perfect solution because sometimes the same TV is made by various different manufacturers in different countries for the same manufacturer. So that's not a guarantee, and that's why I suggest buying them at the store at the same time, so they're likely to be from the same lot number. It's also nice to have the same bezel width and exact sizing from monitor to monitor. A final factor that I didn't think of until I got my TVs home was the remote control. By having matching TVs, one remote can control all the TVs, and you can adjust the settings simultaneously if you're careful to keep the remote aimed toward all the TVs. So my first step in buying a new set of monitors is to first do some research on Ratingscom, find out what models and brands are suggested, do a little research, and I take my cell phone along so that I could research that during the buying process. If you find a model in Ratingscom that's available online and you're confident with their ratings, you could order the TVs and have them delivered. I, however, suggest buying it locally. My strategy is to buy the TV from someplace that has a very liberal return policy so that I can try the TV, and if I don't like it, I can take it back with no penalty. In fact, I might be tempted to buy all three TVs, open one, try it, and then take them back if I don't like them. And that's why I like to go to Costco, because they have a very liberal return policy about opened boxes. I've also found that they have a pretty good supply to pick from and very good pricing. And just to be clear, I have no affiliation with Costco except as a customer. After a walk around the store to see what's available in the size that I need, and in most cases 55 inches are very good size, usually a very inexpensive because it's one of the most common sizes sold. The information posted and on the boxes should give you an idea of some of the features. You can also do research on your phone. Try to decide if any of these TVs is going to serve your purposes. If you need to come back another day after doing more research, that's great. It may take some reading to find out if it has a variable refresh rate, but you can certainly look at the side viewing angle and see how it looks. You can look at the reflection, the bezel width, and things like that. Also, you can determine if it has local dimming, if it's an LCD screen. If you decide to make the purchase, I would load them up, take them home, open one, hook it up to my system, give it a run through to see how it looks, and make sure that there's no noticeable input lag that's beyond what you can accept. Take a good look at the color and put it through some paces, and if you're happy, you can open the others and put the system together. If not, package up the one that you've opened and take them back. And that's why I would prefer to buy it locally instead of having return shipping, even if you could find an online source with very liberal return policy. You really don't have to spend a fortune to set this thing up. I've seen televisions 55 inches at Costco that look quite good for $250, $300. So for a modest price, you can set up a pretty nice, very immersive 3-screen visual. So I hope this was helpful to some people who might be looking to buy big screen televisions for their simulator. Of course, these are just my ideas, and I'm sure you have plenty of great ideas to share too. Please share them in the comments. They really are a great source of information for me too. And if you find my channel useful, please subscribe. Only about 30% of the viewers of my channel are subscribers, and I'd appreciate subscriptions. Please share this with your friends. As I said, I love your comments. And you can click that notification bell if you want to be notified every time I put a new video up. I don't do it unless I have something to share. I just want to thank you for spending your time to watch this video. Have a great day.